just on the way back from a unsuccessful hunt. Really bit of a nature walk. I'm in the rainforest here. I was just walking out and I was crossing this bridge here. It's a wee footbridge. And I remembered that this is probably the place where I come the closest to the line of exposure. It's a big long story, and I made heaps of mistakes, which only learners should make. But what had happened is I just nipped out for a quick hunt. This was quite a few years ago. In those days, a quick hunt was, you know, what would take me a day to do now. But the rain had stopped and the weather was changing, so I'd been in a tent for 3 or 4 days, just sitting and reading a book. And I decided to, because I had a couple of hours before dark, I'd see if I could nobble a deer or something. So anyhow, what happened was I'd headed up into the bush there. You can't really see much, it's just bush. But what happens is you climb up and gain a bit of height, and then things clear up a wee bit. So I got in a good spot, and there was a deer that it got quite foggy because of the change in the weather and temperature and stuff. And then towards dark the temperature dropped quite a lot, and it dropped below freezing, but there was still quite a heavy fog, mainly because all the moisture was around. And so in the bush you could only see maybe 2 or 3 metres. It was as thick as anything. And prior to that I'd seen a bit of deer sign, so I was quite keen to stay as long as I could. And what happened was, when you get further up in the bush there, you gain quite a lot of height, and then there's a sort of like a flat piece which sort of slopes away, and it slopes away on 3 sides. And in the fog it was quite amazing how you could go downhill. Well, it seemed like you're going downhill because that's all you really need to do to get out. Go downhill, cross a couple of creeks, hit this creek that we've got here, follow it down, and you're out. But what happened was, no matter how hard I concentrated, I kept coming back to the same spot. I was suffering from a bit of exhaustion after I'd done that 3 or 4 times, and I was in a bit of a panic. Now, I could have just stopped higher up. I had some matches and some other stuff. I could have got a fire going, but I was getting quite cold, and what I didn't remember was that I wanted to keep my nice woolen clothes dry for the next day, because I was going to do a big full-day hunt. And so I just left my cotton t-shirt on underneath my woolen jacket. And for some reason I just kept getting cold, and in the end, after the 3rd time I'd arrived back at the same spot, I sat down, had a bit of a drink of water, had some fruit and stuff, and just waited till it got dark. And strange as it may sound, once it got pitch black and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, it was actually easier to navigate than in the fog, because it was just dark. There was nothing to confuse you. You just went by the sound of the creeks. I knew I had to cross 2 creeks and follow the 3rd one down. So once it got dark, I just started walking out. And yeah, as I say, strange as it may seem, it was actually a wee bit easier. But by that time I was quite cold and exhausted. And so what had happened was, I got to this creek here, probably about 1 kilometre up there, and followed it down. And because it was dark, I didn't want to leave the creek. Normally what I do, I was following the creek, is you don't actually follow the creek down, you get up on a ridge above it and just keep it on your left hand side or your right hand side or something. But I followed the creek down, and it was getting quite dangerous. I kept slipping over and walking into trees and all sorts of things. And so what I did, it seemed quite strange, and you can actually, even though it was like 20 something years ago, you can still see a log up there. I remember climbing underneath that, And in those days this track here wasn't quite so tourist friendly, and so there was a lower, rougher bridge, but all the sticks had built up against the bridge when there was a lot of water coming down. And so in the dark I couldn't find my way through it, so I ended up sitting down probably just over there somewhere, and realising that I probably couldn't go any further. It was just getting too dangerous. But what I didn't realise is the actual main river is just over here, and the track actually follows pretty much along the river back to where my tent was. But of course in the dark you couldn't see anything, and all I could hear was this creek here. So I sat down just over there against the bank, and I thought, well, you know, I'll probably get a better chance of surviving if I just stay there for the night, even though I was really quite cold. Silly thing is, if I had have pulled the pin earlier, I could have, when it was still a bit daylight, I probably could have got a fire going and camped further up the hill where it was a bit warmer. But anyhow, I managed to find a dry match and lit a cigarette. Used to smoke in those days, bad habit. And so I was sitting there just leaning back, sucking on the cigarette. And in the glow of the cigarette, I didn't have a torch with me because I'd flattened the batteries the night before reading a book. And in the glow of the cigarette, I could just make out the wee bridge going across the track here. And I thought, sweet. But then when I got up and started to walk, I was starting to get a bit uncoordinated, and I didn't think I could actually walk the hour along the track in the dark back to my tent. So I made it up onto the wee bridge, and I had a German Army poncho with me, so I put that down on the bridge and wrapped myself up in it and tried to go to sleep, but it was just too cold. The cold that I was feeling was just indescribable. It was I felt like even my bones were cold. So I realised if I stayed there the night I was probably not going to wake up in the morning. So in the end I just got up and walked back to my tent very slowly. It took me maybe an hour's walk, probably took me 3 or 4 hours. I got back to the tent at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. In those days it used to get dark about, in the middle of the winter it gets dark about 6 o'clock. So I struggled along this track here, and a couple of times I walked off the side of the track into the river and got wet. And the only way I found the tent was by walking into it, tripping over the guy ropes. So yeah, I climbed into the tent and straight in the sleeping bag, cooked a feed while I was in the sleeping bag, just in the vestibule of the tent. But I couldn't hardly eat the food. I managed to get down some rice and stuff, but I couldn't eat any bread or anything like that. And when I woke up in the morning, I had like the flu, and my throat closed up, and I was quite sick. So I just left everything, the camp there, and walked the 20 minutes back to the car, back to where the end of the road. Just climbed in the car, turned the heater on, and drove back to town. Come back and pick my gear up a week later. I've always remembered that because I made some quite silly mistakes. And even now, quite a few years later, it affects the way I go about things. Now I'm tend, if I get caught out in the bush and it's getting dark, I'll just stay there and make a fire and make the best of it, rather than pushing myself to right to my limit. In those days I was quite fit, and you know, I was working and trapping in the bush full time, so I wasn't an unfit person. And the trouble is, you tend to push yourself, and you always back yourself, but you know, sooner or later your wheels fall off. Now I'm older, I am not so fit. In fact, I'm very unfit. I tend to take things pretty easy and always err on the side of the caution. And when I pack my bag, I always make sure that I have more than I need. Too many jerseys, too much warm clothes, yeah, I noticed back in the day all you really went out with was your woolen jacket and a knife and you know, maybe a bag of nuts or something and a drink of water. But even on a easy hunt today, I've got half a pack full of stuff. You can see down there. That's half full of stuff. I've got spare food, warm jersey, survival blanket, all that sort of stuff. And I'm even thinking I didn't bring enough. Crazy, really. But anyhow, that's probably the closest I've ever come to dying of exposure. I've had a few other frights when I've been out hunting and stuff. But yeah, you could say that smoking probably saved my life. But there's no reason to take up smoking. There's always, some people reckon that smoking made you a better hunter because you're more inclined just to you know, sit down and take in the scenery sort of thing and get the easy deer. And you're probably right, but yeah, anyhow, that's how smoking saved my life.
The thing I remember most about the event that I was talking about in the video, just to sum everything up, was how quickly when you lay down your body temperature dropped. I was reading recently a bit of history about the winter war in Finland, about how any soldiers that got wounded, once their blood pressure dropped, how quickly they just froze. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but from what I understand is when you sit down or lie down, your blood pressure drops quite a bit, and it certainly kicks things off. The other thing I remember about it is how quickly the hypothermia, or the early signs of hypothermia, kicked in. I was going pretty good, I was pretty warm, in a bit of a rush, running around trying to find my way out. Next thing you know, there's blue spots in front of your eyes, and yeah, you're telling jokes to yourself and going a bit funny. But the other thing I also remember was on 2 occasions when I actually sat down and ate a bit of food, especially later on when I had some fruit and nuts and a bit of water. It was a bit like what I'd imagine maybe a heroin user when they give themselves an injection or whatever they do. How quickly it went through your body. You could actually feel the energy and the warmth just travelling through your body, just with the you know, the very sweet dried fruit. So that's a bit of a lesson too, I guess, because you know, just I've you know, read an article where they say, you know, certain chocolate bars and stuff like that can put off the onset of hypothermia by, you know, so many minutes or so many hours or whatever. So it's something to be aware of when you're packing a gear, and it's something to be aware of when you get in tricky situations. But I haven't got much more to say about it. There's plenty on the internet about hypothermia and stuff. Yeah, but there's just, you know, I just thought I'd share my thoughts about it. Yeah, it's a, you know, people think hypothermia is about getting cold, but it's not necessarily about that. It's about, you know, getting exhausted and a bit cold and maybe wet, yeah, and all that sort of stuff. So anyhow, that's about all I've got to say.